So you've created your podcast format, or at least you've started the process. And now we're gonna switch. We're gonna talk about something that kind of couples right up with your format. And that is your podcast name, which we talked a little bit about already, your podcast description, your episode titles, and your episode descriptions. Now, I mentioned this in the last video when we talked about formatting your show, but I really want to hit this point home really hard. And that is your podcast name is extremely important. You guys have heard the term SEO. It stands for search engine optimization. It's the ability for a search engine or search on any website you're on to find the content you're looking for. So if this were Google, you would go to Google, you type in certain keywords, and then you would expect Google to pull up information as it relates to those keywords, right? To the information you put in there. Well, podcast apps are exactly the same way, and we're going to use Apple Podcasts as an example today. But in order for these search queries to pull up the right information, your podcast has to be considered. So you need to be very careful on what you title your podcast. And as I mentioned in the last video, don't be cute, or don't be cute at the expense of giving up some of those cute keywords. I guess they could be cute too, but don't be cute at the expense of giving up important keywords that people would actually be searching for. So just as a quick reminder, when it comes to your podcast title, make it short. I recommend 4 words or less. If you can do 3 words of less, that's even better. Use keywords that people would be searching for in order to find your content. So again, this is why it's so important to become a podcast listener as well before you launch your podcast. What would you be typing in order to find your content? You gotta really think about your avatar, your listener here. What would they be typing in? Those are the words you have to use in your podcast name. So your podcast name is SEO friendly, search engine optimization friendly. What else is SEO friendly? Because that's what you really got to focus in on. Your episode titles are SEO friendly. What should you put in your episode titles? You have a little bit more flexibility. You have more words that you can use in a episode title than you do in a podcast title. Like I said, podcast name, podcast title, I'm kind of using that interchangeably. That's 4 words. I would keep it 4 words or less if you can. And try to avoid the little words, like if you can get rid of the and a little tiny words that really aren't going to give you much bang for your buck, try to get rid of those. But your episode titles need to accurately describe what your episode is about. While you have more room, I would say up to 8 words, no more than 10. Shorter is better, but it still does rely on search engine optimization. It is SEO optimized. So think about what is in that particular episode. What would people be searching for in that particular episode to find your content? So those are the words you know you have to use. There are some people that choose to put their guest's name in the episode title. You can do that if you have the space. I never did that, but if you had some big names on the show, I take that back. I did it one time, and it was with well, she's not really well known, but she's really well known in birthing circles because, again, all my content was focused on parents and families. And I had a pregnancy show, and one of the biggest midwives, she's written books, like everybody wants to have their baby with this woman. They go on a farm, literally, to have a baby with this woman. And I actually got an interview with her. And I was like, oh, and I knew my audience would be super stoked. Her name's Ina Mae Gaskin, if anyone's wondering. And I knew my audience would be super stoked if I got this interview. That's the only time I included a guest or an expert's name in my episode titles. You may do things a little bit differently. If you are interviewing celebrities all over the place, put that name in your title because people will find it more easily and be excited and listen and tell all their friends about it. But for most of us, we're interviewing everyday people. And I don't know that there's a tremendous amount of value in putting people who aren't famous I'm just throwing it out there. People who aren't famous, you may find more value in putting more keywords in there because more people are going to be searching for those keywords than searching for that expert or that guest, if that makes sense. But you certainly can do it. Other than that, keep it as small as you can, 8 to 10 words max, and that's really a good episode title length. Let's talk a little bit about descriptions. So we have descriptions, a description for your podcast. Your whole podcast has one description, and then each episode has its own description. Here's what you need to know about descriptions. They are not SEO friendly. So don't try to be super duper creative and come up with a bunch of keywords for your description because no one's gonna be able to find it, right? No one's gonna be able to find it that way. Your description should be short and right to the point. Because, and I'm gonna show you this, we're actually gonna show you an example of this in just a second. Most people are listening to your podcast on some sort of app. And I don't know if you haven't noticed, but iPhones, and if you've got an Android phone, no phone is big anymore. Technically, this is a phone now. They're not big. It's hard to read stuff. So we don't want super long titles. We don't want super long descriptions because no one's going to hit that show more button. They're just going to go with what they can see on the screen. So keep that in mind. Descriptions are important. Keep them to 2 to 3 sentences maybe, I would say, because that's all that's going to show up on your app. And they are not SEO friendly, so don't worry about throwing a bunch of keywords in there. So now we're going to take a look and see what podcast names, episode titles, and descriptions look like within a podcast player, right? How people would be accessing your podcast. Because this kind of boils down to promotion and marketability, right? Things have to look good in order for people to find your content, click on it, and subscribe, which is what we want them to do. So we're going to take a look at Apple Podcasts, and I am on the desktop version, the Mac desktop version right now. Obviously, this isn't my phone. And I just went to browse, right? So this section over here, browse. And you can see, they're recommending a bunch of different podcasts to me, but I'm just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna click on Radio Headspace. So this is part of New and Noteworthy. So it's either new, a brand new podcast, or it's noteworthy for some reason. They felt the need to highlight it. So we're gonna check this out. And I wanna show you what you're looking at here. So up here where it says Radio Headspace, that's the name of the podcast. Just below it, we see Headspace Studios and Cadence 13. Headspace Studios in this example is a podcast production company, and Cadence 13 is a podcast network. So there's a bunch of people behind this show. Here is your category. So in this case, it's mental health. And you see some ratings information, things like that. If you want to subscribe, you can come over here, click subscribe. The podcast description. So the description for the entire podcast is found right here, where it starts with Join Andy. That is the description. You can see they only made it a few sentences long. If I click more, there's actually nothing else to discover. So that's good. Having it a few sentences long is great because very few people are going to do what I did and just click that more button. And you can see here it's divided up. They had a trailer, they have a season, so everything's according to seasons with this. But what I really want to look at is an individual episode. So you see the date it was released, the name of the episode or the title of the episode, and then this is the description of the episode. Keep in mind, descriptions are not found through SEO. Only the podcast name, the episode title, and your author tag. But here's what I want you to see. See over here how this cuts off? We have kind of a little ellipsis right here. That's what you don't want. If your episode descriptions get to be too long, you get a little ellipses. And no one's gonna wanna click to find out more. So you don't want to leave them hanging. So this episode description is a little bit too long in my opinion. But if you come down here, now that was just for the trailer, if you come down here, they're actually doing a really good job here. And I think with all their episodes, they're doing a really good job. See how the sentence ends here? Nothing's cut off. The sentence ends with free, and you can see everything. You don't have to scroll for more information. You don't have to click a button. This is why we keep our episode description short and we keep our overall podcast description short, is because people are not going to click to find more.